So I'm going to be talking now about a number of things. Mostly I'm going to be talking about the difference between a curve-based color adjustment and a slider-based color adjustment. Now what I've got here are two viewers, one reading out to that viewer window and one reading out to that viewer window. I've also got two main nodes. That is the sampler node reading out here and the color lookup reading out there. First of all, what is a sampler node? Well, let's just drag that fellow over to there and broaden that screen a bit. Now, what a sampler node is, it's quite simple. It's quite obvious what it is. It samples values. It takes a line somewhere across the view, and it samples the values from that line, and it gives a readout. So in this case, in this instance, the line that it's looking at is around 100 pixels away from the bottom, and that's indicated by this value there, and that'll be round about, say, there. It's quite a large file. So in order to get a sample, I've put in my scanline value there, that's 100 pixels. Sample current frame, click once in the window to refresh, sometimes it needs that. And I see reading along here, it's dark, 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 then suddenly light and quite blue. And the same here, dark, 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 suddenly light and quite blue. Okay, so it's a very useful node for getting feedback. Let's just move that scanline up. How tall is our image? Let's go, say, 2000 to 123. Sample current frame. Click in there to refresh, and you'll notice that it's very light and then suddenly dark. So very light and then suddenly dark. Okay, so that's the sampler node. Very useful little fella. Alright, let's read from the same ramp. We've got a ramp, which is just a gradient. Now, if we sample from that ramp, click in the window to refresh. Because it's a linear ramp from black to white, there's even distribution, we have a straight line. So there we go, straight line. Now it emulates very neatly the default view of a color lookup. Except the difference, obviously, between a color lookup and a sampler, the sampler looks at information and the color lookup changes information. Let's have a quick go at this a second. Let's do a multiply. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect that to that and that to that. And I'm going to make that darker. Sample current frame, click in the window, I've made it darker. Now let's go over to the lookup table. Let's just delete that point there and set this to default. Now if I drag that down to the same point that our sampler is previewing, you'll notice that it's made our ramp look roughly the same. So it's a very useful tool for visualizing effects. And in this instance, it's showing us clearly what a multiply does to a data range. It leaves the blacks alone there, but it lowers the whites. Okay, very useful tool. Now, let's open up a grade. Right, let's just push this back to our default there and open up a grade node here. In fact, what we should do, I think, is to float that so we can look at all three of those nodes at the same time. Right, so we've got let's change our black point on that. Let's say move that over there. Sample current frame, click in the window. I've had that effect. So let's see if I can emulate that and make our color lookup the same as our sampler. So you see our lookup and sampler are the same as are our views in the viewer window. Let's set this back to default. Let's change our white point. No, let's do something a little bit more. Let's do a gamma. Let's do it the other way. Okay. So sample current frame, click. It's given us that curve. Let's set that back to the default. And let's try and emulate that curve. And lo and behold, we do it reasonably carefully, we can get the two images to look roughly the same. Now these sliding based adjustments, they're very attractive because they present simple sliders. However, you look down these values. Now I could talk for some length as to what a black point is, a white point, a lift, a gain, a multiply, an offset. But really, it all comes down to shapes and curves, which you can remember and deal with intuitively, I believe, a lot more easily. The lovely thing about a color lookup is that as well as doing the adjustment, it also gives visual feedback of that adjustment. So it's adjusting and giving feedback at the same time. So color adjustment in the compositing world, it's divided into two camps. Some people like sliding based adjustments, some people like color lookup and curve adjustments. You decide. Frankly, I'm a big fan of the latter, but there you go.